First of all, I'd like to offer a couple of small corrections to the initial video. The singing monolith actually comes in two musical forms. We hear György Ligeti's Requiem when the Apes Council members and Dave Bowman encounter the monolith. That's three instances of monolith-assisted evolution accompanied by the same musical piece. At the end of the Stargate tunnel, Requiem blends into another Ligeti piece called Atmospheres. Hence my assumption in the original video that it was the same musical composition. Atmospheres is also heard at the very beginning of the film over a black screen, even before the MGM logo, and later repeats during the black screen intermission before the astronauts do battle with Hal. And after the credits finish, we're left staring at an empty black screen until the music finishes. This is very unusual in a feature film, because credits are usually timed to finish with the music. Another mistake in my original video was my assertion that in the book Arthur C. Clarke had depicted the monolith as a pyramid within a sphere. It was actually Clarke's original 1951 short story The Sentinel in which it was a pyramid. This doesn't alter the monolith as screen metaphor. Instead, it clarifies that the change in monolith shape came as a result of Kubrick's involvement. Toward the end of this video, we'll compare the writing of the book and film in more detail, but for now, let's explore the exact monolith dimensions in relation to the cinema screen. The dimensions of the monolith are not described in the film, and there is only one instance in which we see it in a position where it can be precisely measured, its final appearance before Dave Bowman. In that position, I took a measurement of 3 by 7. In all other scenes, the monolith is presented at angles from which we are unable to take accurate measurements. Its presentation from a measurable angle at the end of the film also suggests that Dave Bowman's transformation into the Star Child is linked to the revelation of monolith measurements. In this same shot, the camera angle shifts to a position that is several meters outside of the room. The conceptual fourth wall has been broken, just as it is when an audience member realizes that the monolith represents the film itself. The book does offer a set of specific monolith measurements which interestingly parallel our own exploration of the subject. One curious and perhaps quite unimportant feature of the block had led to endless argument. The monolith was 11 feet high and 1¼ by 5 feet in cross-section. When its dimensions were checked with great care, they were found to be in the exact ratio 1:4:9, the squares of the first three integers. No one could suggest any plausible explanation for this, but it could hardly be coincidence, for the proportions held to the limits of measurable accuracy. The precise face-on dimension of 4 by 9 in the book is mismatched by the monolith scene in the film, at least according to my measurements, but the difference is only very slightly out and could simply be the result of my own monitor resolution. 2001 was specifically shot in Super Panavision 70 and initially projected on Cinerama screens. Cinerama was an extra widescreen format in which the final film was projected on a curved screen to give a panoramic vision effect. This curved projection factor complicates any attempt to compare the Cinerama screen measurements with the monolith. It has a perceptually distorting effect. Super Panavision 70 had an aspect ratio of 1 by 2.2, which is equivalent to 4 by 8.8. That's only slightly short of the 4 by 9 measurement given in the book. So although we don't have a perfect match between the Cinerama screen and the monoliths of the book and film, they're close enough to be indistinguishable to the unaided human eye. The chances of this occurring by accident are slim, considering the variety of rectangular dimensions or alternative geometric shapes that could have been used to represent the monolith. Subjectively, the monoliths of the book and film and the Cinerama screen are a match. Returning to the content of the film, there are many more examples of monolith screen symbology that weren't described in my original video. The very first shot of the film is a good example. We see the moon, from which emerges an earthrise and then a sunrise. But these celestial rises should be emerging from the equatorial regions at the side. Instead, we're viewing the whole scene from a perfect 90-degree angle, with the north and south poles to either side. Let's look at the Moonbus landing. When we see the landing area come into view in the cockpit window, it begins rotating and moving directly toward the computer display screen on the lower left, where it will align. The computer display alternately shows a circular grid pulsing toward us like the Stargate explosion. In the middle of this target grid is a rectangular half monolith just below the center of the crosshair. As the landing pad reaches its horizontal position, the missing top half of the monolith rectangle suddenly floats in from the right of the display and aligns with the center of the crosshair. The vertically positioned monolith is completed and the entire crosshair display begins flashing in white. One fan of the film devised a computer program that could scan and map the Stargate patterns. And one of the most interesting details of the scans is this fractal pattern of black and green arrows, each rotating 90 degrees into the next, suggesting a fractal film of multiple reality levels. A literally fractal film can be seen in what is called video feedback. This effect occurs when a rolling video camera is used to film the same television screen upon which the camera's live image is being projected. Much more common is audio feedback, the high-pitched drone heard when a live microphone is placed near its own speaker. It's also used as the high-pitched sound in standard video color bar and tone signals. And Kubrick has also referenced this audio feedback in 2001. In the excavation scene, the monolith gives off a high-pitched video feedback signal. It is the council members' realization that the monolith is a cinema screen that triggers this feedback signal. The scene begins with the astronauts standing over a monolith-shaped excavation scene. They descend the ramp and begin circling the monolith contained within. But pay attention to the background. At one end of the pit is a yellow piece of machinery, and at the other end is an identical machine, but this time in red. As Floyd begins circling the monolith, the camera angle appears to flip to a reverse shot. But look at the background. We see the same red machine in both shots. The camera actually stayed in roughly the same position on the same side of the monolith, while Floyd flipped from one side of the monolith to the other. The excavation is a mirrored reality with near identical features on either side. Note the unusually prominent lens flares, which are basically giant illuminated rectangles floating about much like the monolith does near Jupiter. Floyd touches both the edge of the monolith and the rectangular lens flare simultaneously. As the group gather in front of the monolith for a photo, the photographer does something odd. He repeatedly tilts his camera sideways in roughly 90-degree increments. The lens flare slowly floats in over his shoulder and triggers the audio feedback signal at the precise moment that it aligns with its own rectangular light source. The timing is unmistakable. As the astronauts build up to the realization that they are in a film, Floyd is seen in shots that are framed to make him appear inside the monolith. For example, look at the ambiguity of this shot. We can see that Floyd is touching the edge of the monolith, but is he touching it from outside or from within? One of the biggest obstacles that has prevented viewers from realizing the simple monolith scream symbolism is that most people assume the film to be based on the book, and thus they mistakenly turn to the book seeking answers to the film's cryptic structure. But the cover of the book clearly states, based on the screenplay by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. And the credits of the film make no mention of the book. They simply state, screenplay by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. So neither the book or the film were based on each other, they were both based upon a screenplay. In a 1969 interview with Joseph Galmus, Kubrick explained, The novel came about after we did a 130-page prose treatment of the film at the very outset. The initial treatment was subsequently changed in the screenplay, and the screenplay in turn was altered during the making of the film. But Arthur took all the existing material plus an impression of some of the rushes and wrote the novel. As a result, there's a difference between the novel and the film. Actually, it was an unprecedented situation for someone to do an essentially original literary work based on glimpses and segments of a film he had not yet seen in its entirety. Kubrick's description of the novel as an essentially original literary work directly implies that the film and novel are presenting different stories, a sort of dual narrative. The result is that the 2001 novel is very different to the film. It features many scenes that were shot but scrapped from the final cut. Some scenes that are in the film, such as Bowman's retrieving of Poole's body and being locked out of the Discovery, aren't in the book. These differences between book and film are all down to Kubrick. He had a 60-40 royalty deal on the book and authorization rights. He had absolute creative control over the film and was in a position to guide Clarke in any writing direction he wished. Rather than ensuring that the novel and film matched each other, Kubrick allowed and probably encouraged a series of conceptual gaps between the novel and film. Despite these considerable differences between the novel and film, Kubrick does appear to have used his influence over the novel to add several extra hints of the screen metaphor. In the book, the monolith emits a sound of drumming to the apes. The film does this to the audience with its famous use of the drum roll from Thus Spake Zarathustra. The book version of the monolith hypnotizes the apes by displaying images on its surface, just like a cinema screen does. The hotel room in the book has a TV screen above the bed, but the film has a monolith above the bed. And this incredible giveaway description is included in the book version of the hotel room. His feeling that he was inside a movie set was almost literally true.